Thank you for joining me on the Who God Says podcast. I am your host and Kingdom Ambassador, Ty-Shaun-Dra. Hi, hi, hi. Today we have a special guest. I am so excited. Oh, okay. So he is known as the Generosity Guy. He is the owner of the wealth investment firm, and this. Okay, we're gonna have to start that over because I don't like that. All right. So today we have a special guest. He is known as the Generosity Guy and the host of Speaking of Impact podcast. We have Mr. Bob DePasquale. Hey, hi,
Hi,
welcome.
Ty-Shaun-Dra. How are you?
I am good. I'm a little
Awesome.
cold, but I'm good. I need my morning tea.
That's funny. I'm a little chilly here too. In South Florida, most people aren't going to complain, but it's been like upper 60s, lower 70s, and we're
Right?
not used to
Because
it.
once it's below 70, we're cold. So,
Exactly. That's my breaking point.
right. I'm like, oh my God, I need jackets. I need heaters. Like, it's crazy. It is crazy. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for giving me your time and your talent and coming on and willing to talk to me in the audience. I appreciate you so much.
Pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Yay. It's been a long time coming. I was
hmm
like, oh my
hmm
God, he didn't want to be here with me.
No, that's not the case. I definitely want to be here. So let's have a good conversation. I'm sure we can get into some interesting stuff.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Speaking of interesting, um, reading your story was very insightful for me. Um it was like a big woo when I started reading your story. Um so you were diagnosed with cancer um
hmm
in early 2000s, right?
2001, yeah.
Yeah. Um so what type of cancer were you diagnosed with?
Well, it had spread, but it was started out as testicular, which happens to
Okay.
be pretty popular in young males. And the younger, 18 to 30 really is, it's not like some other forms of cancer where you think it might be for elder or the elderly.
Yeah.
And, but it had spread up into my abdomen. So it was pretty aggressive. It was one of those types of cancer that you don't really want to wait too long. I mean, if you don't find it early, it could be tough.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. Do you know any type of numbers like statistically? Um, you said a lot of young males, but do you know any type of statistics that you can give us on that?
Well, all I do know is the 18 to 30 is when it's most popularly diagnosed. It's There are different types of testicular cancer. I mean, there's different forms. Some are highly curable, but they're very aggressive. Some are not quite as curable. And actually, I didn't know this, but about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 months ago, I actually had a conversation with my mom, and she told me that the doctor, when they first found it, um, I remember him telling me, okay, this is extremely aggressive, but it's 99% curable. But apparently that wasn't until they figured out the type that it was. My mom had told me that the doctor had told her, if it's this one type, then we feel like we got a really good shot. If it's not, it could be 50-50. So
Wow.
it really depends. I mean, and I would imagine now, I mean, we're talking over 20 years later, I would imagine the statistics are different now, and they probably have done even more research to
Yeah.
learn more about the ways that form of cancer, and really any form of cancer, works. I mean,
Right.
modern medicine is truly amazing.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's crazy. Um, whew, I can't imagine. So you were diagnosed with cancer. What was like your first thoughts when you heard, hey, the news that you have cancer? What was your first thought, and how did your attitude towards life change when you heard that news?
Yeah. Well, my first thought was, no way, you're wrong. I'm 18. I don't have cancer. That's for old people. There can't be anything wrong with me.
Wow.
I'm invincible. And the way that the doctor told me, I mean, I was by myself, technically an adult at the age of 18, but not really an adult mentally.
Yeah.
And the way he sat me down and just kind of spat it out in like just a couple seconds, and I mean, I was just dead silent. I think my jaw hit the desk. I mean, my mouth opened and I was like, what? And I couldn't believe it. So that was my first reaction. And then as far as how my view on life changed, I think I went into fight or flight, like desperation mode right
Mm.
after, shortly after that period. And I don't really know if I thought about life or mortality at all. I was just so determined and focused on beating cancer and doing whatever the doctors told me that I had to do to be successful and to survive. But shortly after I I went through my treatment, I started to think a little bit more deeply about life and how precious it really is. I mean, I went up to college at the age of 18 thinking I was going to be this invincible athlete and playing sports and living my own life, getting out of South Florida. Not that I don't like, I mean, I love South Florida. I moved back here, but I wanted to do my own thing, like a young kid wants to do and
Yeah.
get out of the house. And then in short order, I realized that, life isn't just all about me, and I can't do this whole thing by myself. I need support from other places. And so I learned those lessons pretty quick after I was diagnosed.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that you had the attitude like whatever I need to do to get better. Because most men, they're like, they fight against treatment, they fight against
Mm-hmm.
hospitals, going to the doctor. Like, even if they have a diagnosis as serious as cancer, it's like, I don't want the people messing with me.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And for you to be a young guy who's like, okay, whatever I have to do to get better, that mindset is amazing. Where did you think that come from? That type of mindset.
Well, that was kind of my mindset in most things in life, whether I was playing sports or in school or had other responsibilities in life. I was the type of person that you just work hard. I mean, my parents were very, very hardworking people. I mean, I had a wonderful home to grow up in. I was an only child, so maybe I was a bit of a
Lucky
spoiled
you.
brat,
Lucky you.
uh, you know. But I think my parents really wanted to combat that entitled attitude for a young person, and they really instilled in me the importance of working hard at the things that you commit yourself to. And, whether that was my faith, whether that was my family, whether that was school or sports. And I think all of those things just manifested in my illness and my health when I got to that point. I always tried to be a pretty healthy person. I wouldn't say I never had dessert or sweets or anything, or, things that weren't necessarily, um, you know, high on the food chain, if you will, but we were pretty healthy people. And so when I
Yeah.
was diagnosed with cancer, it really hit me and it said, you know what? Doesn't matter how hard you try to be healthy, something can get you.
Right.
So I went into, like I said, determination mode. And to answer your question, I really think it was because of most things in life. My parents said, you've committed to this. You've taken these classes at school. You're going to work hard at them. Or you've committed to being on this football team or this baseball team. You're going to go to practice and you're going to work hard. And there were times that I didn't want to, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think all of them, now that I look at it, I'm really glad you asked this question. It's kind of cathartic for me to think about this. Um, that really had a big part of my mindset when I was going through my treatments. That was really, really key.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. That is great. Not too many young guys have that, just that drive and that kudos to the parents. Yay.
I like I said, I think it was out of desperation. I don't know if maybe God did bless me with some determination, but I don't, I didn't consider myself more equipped or better than anyone else at that point to go through what I was going through. I think it was just, you kind of have to, you have no choice.
Yeah.
If I'm going to win this battle, then I can't afford to do things that aren't going to be helpful. So, I mean, I tried to be the best cancer patient I can possibly be. Now, I think there were other forces in my life, that helped me that I wasn't aware of at the time. But at least I knew I could control what I could control, and that
Yeah.
was, you know, how I took care of myself, how I slept, what I ate, what I didn't eat, hydration, the timing of things. Like I knew when my body had gone through too much and I needed to just rest. And I knew when my body was energetic and I needed to do some things that were good for my mental health at the time. So I think that determination was key, and I wouldn't put it past any human,
Yeah.
any person that God's put on this earth. I think is capable of going through what I went through. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm extra specially qualified or anything. I think I had just put in the right situations to be able to execute what needed to be done.
Oh my God.
Hi everyone. Join the Kingdom Fanatics community. Get exclusive content, green room access with our guests, and more. Visit our website at whogodsays.com. Like and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate your love and support. To find all information on joining our community, being a guest on the show, donating on our PayPal donation page, and more, visit us at whogodsays.com. Now back to the show.
That is awesome. To God be the glory. I admire your humility. That's awesome. But I think it's still an amazing thing to have that type of attitude when you're going through something that serious.
Mm-hmm.
I actually was diagnosed with cervical cancer in 2013.
Wow.
But I didn't go through any treatments or anything like that. I just was like, I was pregnant at the time. And yeah, I was
Wow.
pregnant at the time, and it was very progressive. But my doctor told me they wanted to abort my baby and do a surgery. And I said, okay, but I never went back to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
What can I ask you? I mean, the question that you asked me, what was your reaction when the doctor told you that? Wow.
I did not care about the cancer, but I was like, abort my baby. I was like, almost 8 months, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like,
Wow.
abort no, I don't know. No, I couldn't fathom, like, I've been gone all these months. I feel this thing moving around and, you know, inside of me, and you're saying abort the baby. I I didn't even care
Wow.
about the cancer part. I was just like, I'm not, no, I'm not doing that. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I never went back to any of my prenatal visits or anything. And I was just like, we'll just deal with this after I have the baby. And that was that.
Wow. I give you a lot of credit for that, man. That's talk about determination and belief in something. Wow. Wow, that's
Yeah,
tremendous.
I couldn't. I was like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that because I felt this child every day, all day. So how can I just
Mhm.
say, you know,
Yeah, you had already started raising another human. I mean, that's
right? It's like I'm already nourishing the child and everything, and
yeah.
it's like,
Yeah, wow.
no. So I didn't go back, but to God be the glory. When I had my son, he's 10 years old now. When I had my son, and I stayed in the hospital. Like, they didn't release me 3 days afterwards. I stayed in the hospital. They did all kind of exams and everything, and I was there. And I was like, okay, I guess they're going to schedule the surgery. And my doctor came in and was like, we don't see anything.
Wow. So, what did that feel like?
It just felt like I was being punked.
That's funny. That's really funny, actually. Wow.
I was like,
You were ready for like a camera to pop up and be like, "Ah, I gotcha."
right.
Yeah,
I didn't
wow.
know I was like, what? Like, because my mind was like, okay, I'm already anticipating. I know he said there was going to be a surgery. And
Hmm.
depending on the outcome of the surgery, then there'll probably be further treatment. So I was getting myself ready. I was anticipating. I was getting myself ready. I have to be in the hospital for a while and all of this and who knows what else. And he was like, well, we don't see anything. And I'm like,
Amazing. Miraculous.
it took me a while. He was like, take your time. And he left me there. He left me there. And he actually came back the next day. He was like, we don't see anything. And they discharged me. We did like a 3 month follow up. I had a minor surgery at the 3 month follow up, but ever since then, it's been nothing. And
Wow. And that was
yes,
a decade ago.
yes, my son is 10 years old now.
Wow. What's your son's name?
Caleb,
Caleb. Awesome. Well, praise the Lord for Caleb.
yes. Praise God. So when you're like, I got to do whatever I got to do to stay healthy, my mind wasn't like my health because we both had cancer, but it was just two different, two different
Yeah.
scenarios. It was I had to preserve his life, and then I could focus on mine. So
Hmm.
yeah, but the there were so many emotions when they told me that I had cervical cancer, and it was called carcinoma something, and it was like really progressive, and yeah, it was so many thoughts, so many emotions, so many just oh my god. And
I can only imagine.
I had
It's amazing.
two other kids, and I'm like, okay, then I'm already a mom, so you're already in mom mode. Okay, how are you gonna get to school? I gotta go through this, I gotta go through that. Who's gonna, it was a lot. Um, did you have how did your family respond to your diagnosis? Like how was their support or their
That's a great question because the day I was diagnosed, my parents were flying up to New York from Florida for my. Now, we knew I wasn't playing in the game at this point, but my first ever college football game was supposed to be that Saturday.
Mhm.
And it was a Thursday. And I had been going through all of these tests, driving all over the place by myself in these appointments for hours. And it
Yeah.
was a drag. I expected that same Thursday. I had no idea they were going to diagnose me with cancer that day. I just thought it was going to be another one of these long, drawn out processes that it was just quite honestly annoying. And my parents called me the moment after I got out of that appointment with the doctor when he said, "Bobby, you have cancer." He that's basically all he said. I mean, I was just flabbergasted. I mean, I didn't even know what to say. My jaw hit the desk, and he said, "We're going to hook you up with an oncologist. You're free to go." And those were his words to me. I was like, "What?" So I didn't even know what to say. I couldn't even believe it. I walk out, and the moment I walked out of this building, strange building, never been, had no
Wow.
idea where I was. But the moment I walked out of this building, my phone rang, and it was my mom, and she, I picked up the phone. I was like, "Hey," and she goes, "Oh, well, I thought you were going to be in this appointment. I was going to leave you a voicemail, let you know that we landed, and we're driving to your uncle's house. That's where my parents were going to be staying at my mom's brother's house." And she goes, "Well, while I have you on the phone, how did the appointment go?" And I was like, so mom, about that appointment. And I had to tell her what the doctor said. And Ty-Shaun-Dra, I can only tell you, like, it was dead silent on the other side of the phone, but I could just feel my mom screaming
Wow.
through the phone. And the only thing I remember hearing was my dad, who was sitting next to her in the car. And I could hear him saying, "Susan, Susan," which is my mom's name. "Susan, what's wrong?" Like even he could tell
Wow.
something was wrong, even though my mom wasn't saying anything and he
Yeah.
couldn't hear me. So their initial reaction was the similar to the shock that I had. And I hadn't seen my parents in over a month. I mean, that was the longest I had ever been away from home as the
Yeah.
only child, mama's boy that I was. And we met back at my uncle's house. And I mean, we shed some tears. We gave each other a big hug, and we said some prayers, and kind of like just stared at each other, like, "Well, what do we do?"
Right.
And I think after that initial shock wore off, my parents specifically, and my aunt and uncle, and my relatives who were up there in New York, I mean, they all went into action mode to figure out how we were going to get me the best treatment we could possibly get. And we ultimately decided I was going to stay in New York for treatment and not go home. And I think that was the right decision.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. Having
So
a support system, your family around you. That's good. That is awesome. That is amazing. Whew. Okay. Um, so we have this cancer diagnosis. How long did your treatments take?
I had 20 rounds. Oh, I had a surgery.
Mhm.
Then I had 20 rounds of chemotherapy. which in a short period of time is pretty aggressive. But I think the doctor looked at an 18-year-old kid who's, athlete, healthy otherwise, that he could hit me pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way the schedule worked is I would go in for chemo for 5 straight days. And believe me, by the end of that week, I mean, I was just smoked. I mean,
Out
I
of
was
it.
completely
Could
out
you
of it.
walk?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yes, but barely. I mean,
Wow.
couldn't keep food down, couldn't eat. Then I would give myself this drug called Neupogen, if I'm remembering the pronunciation correctly, and it was a white blood cell booster because when you take chemo, it kills
Mm.
the good stuff too.
Yeah.
So my body was just taxed. So I would give myself these shots for 10 days after the weekdays full of treatment. So I would do 5 days of treatment, then I would do 10 days of shots, and then that would put me. Then I had a couple of days where I was basically just recovering,
Yeah.
and then I would go back and do it again. So it took about 2, 3, 4 months to get all of my treatments done, but I really packed in 20 rounds of chemo in a really short period of time. So by the end of that, by December of that year, so it was September that I was diagnosed. By December, I had lost 30 plus pounds, all my hair. I mean, I probably looked like a completely different person, but the chemotherapy worked. So
Yeah.
I'll never complain about what I had to go through.
Yeah. Wow. Ooh. Were
So it
you
was tough.
staying with your aunt and uncle at the time, or were you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. God bless them. My mom at the time worked for our friends, so they let her. And this is way before remote work was possible,
Right.
really. So this wasn't the work from home environment that we have now. So they allowed her, basically gave her 3 or 4 months off to stay with me. So my mom and I stayed up at my uncle's house there in New York, and my dad would travel back and forth. So he would come home for 2 weeks, go to work, and then come back for the week of my treatment, and then turn around and go home. And so he did that for that period of time there. And yeah, and I one of the blessings in that during that whole situation, one of the silver linings of the whole dark cloud was that I got to spend a lot of time with my cousins who I didn't know that well, and my cousins and I are really close now. That was such a blessing to be able to spend a lot of time with them, and they're younger than me, but really like become like really really good friends.
That's awesome. Connecting with family. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you guys have like a lot of family gatherings?
Well, when I was feeling okay, yeah, I remember my I think my oh, man, I think my last treatment was the Friday before Thanksgiving, I think. And I remember usually about a week after one of my 5 straight days of chemo, I would start feeling a little bit better. And I remember on Thanksgiving Day that we played a little like touch football game with a bunch of people in the family and some neighbors. And I mean, that was a big step for me to do something athletic after basically sitting around
Oh
for
yeah.
3 or 4 months. And so to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I'll never forget that day because that really reminded me, or like kind of told me, man, I've I don't feel great, but I feel a heck of a lot better than I have. And look at
Yeah.
all these people that are here for me. Honestly, I don't think that many people would have played in the game if I wasn't around. I mean, they never told me this, but I kind of have a feeling that the Turkey Bowl, if you want to call it that, on in November of 2001 was basically for me, and
Mm,
it was cool. That was a fun time.
that sounds fun. Yeah. Get the
Yeah,
bones moving, all the joints moving around.
yeah. I probably was sore later that day or the next day from running. I probably hadn't sprinted in 3 or 4 months, but well, sprinted for what it was at that time. I probably felt like I was going fast, but anyway. So yeah, it felt really really good, and that soreness probably felt great the next couple days. I probably said, man, it feels good to work out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still here. I'm still alive. Woo. Okay. So
Yep.
during that time, um you were in New York and the nation was in chaos because of 9/11.
Hmm.
So what was that like being aware of all of that loss while the nation is in chaos and you're also going through your personal situation?
Yeah, so I talked about the moment where I saw my parents right after I had been diagnosed, and at that moment, I was thinking to myself, man, here I was. I thought I was this invincible 18-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I'm extremely mortal and maybe my life is coming to an end. And so I was in a really strange mental state. So, but it wasn't until 5 days later where
Mm.
I was coming out of my second ever college class. Now, my oncologist had advised me to still take some classes to keep my mind busy during this period of time. So I actually went to class. And I came out of this class and I was watching the news. I was in the cafeteria grabbing something to eat and I was watching the news. Now I'm a kid from New York. I mean, I don't know the news stations. I don't even watch the news, to be honest with you.
Right.
And there's an old school television. Like, remember those box old,
Mm-hmm.
before they had flat screens like the one behind me? There was a bracket in between the ceiling and the wall in the corner there, and that's what the news was on. So, and I had young, healthy eyes, but I'm like squinting to even see what's going on, right? And I'm watching it, and I saw a plane hit one of the towers there in
Yeah.
Manhattan, and it didn't register to me at the moment. I just thought, wow, I mean, that's a terrible accident. Like, how horrible is that? And so I called my dad, who was at my uncle's house at the time, and I said, "Hey, Dad, did you watch this?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm watching the news. I mean, that's terrible." And we were talking for maybe 30 seconds, a minute or so, and bam, the second plane hit the other tower. And my dad's like, "Whoa, son, that is not an accident. You better get back to your uncle's house here."
Yeah.
So I hightailed it out of that cafeteria. I think my food is still sitting on the counter there. I mean, I didn't even finish it. I just left. I hopped in the car. It would typically take me about 15 minutes to get from school to my uncle's, but it took me 9 hours. And
Wow.
I was driving down the highway listening to AM radio. Now, I've worked in radio. I have a master's degree in broadcast journalism. I love that medium, but I will never, ever listen to 9 straight hours of AM radio again. But it was riveting with
Wow.
burning towers like way in the distance because I'm in New York, driving away from this whole thing. And I actually ran out of gas in my uncle's neighborhood. Thankfully, I
Wow.
didn't run out of gas on the highway. I can't imagine what would have happened then. I would have just been stuck. I mean, it was bumper to bumper on the Northern State Parkway there in Long Island. And
Wow.
I got to my uncle's house. And, well, we had to push my car into the driveway at my uncle's house. And I saw my parents again. And it was like a recap of the same moment 5 days before when I had been diagnosed. We
Right.
were looking at each other like, now instead of like, oh man, my life might be over. Now we're looking at each other thinking, oh my goodness, the world might be over.
Wow. That's scary. Wow. Ooh, okay. Um, so what was life like after that in New York? Like school, and I know you had to go through your treatments in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like with friends and with other family members? Like, what was life like after that?
Well, it was a little fearful at first. And then it suddenly turned to this level of camaraderie, confidence, and patriotism that I don't think I've ever felt before. Um, my father was a Marine. I think my grandfather was in the Army. But we weren't, I mean, listen, we love our country, the United States. But I didn't grow up I didn't do, ROTC or any of those things in school. So I wasn't really, like, I never really got that feeling of like we're in this together as
Yeah.
Americans. But there was something about that, and I'm sure it was like that in every state, but something about New York and being right near where it was and knowing people that had died and had passed away or had not been found yet was so powerful. So life was survival mode for everyone. Now it was survival mode for me as well with my treatment. And I have some stories about trying to get around and going into New York City for different tests and things right
Mm.
after. I mean, days and the week after 9/11, it was like things were shut down. I mean, things were shut down for a year, but that week after, it was like, I mean, you couldn't get anywhere in Manhattan.
Wow.
So it was quite a challenging time for me because I was desperately trying to get treated and figure out what we're going to do with my cancer, no less all of what was going on. So life was unique. I met a lot of my uncle's neighbors that I don't think I would have met because I think people were trying to spend more time together, and conversations were so deep. And it was, it was really, really unique. And in some crazy way, I think it might have been good for me mentally, considering all that I was going through with my cancer. There was other things to think about. I really couldn't just dwell on my illness.
Yeah.
So life wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. But I think it was empowering to see all these people coming together and to meet people that I never would have met, and to my uncle's foundation has for cystic fibrosis, which is a disease that my cousin has. They had offices in the towers there, so there was quite a deep connection between what happened and my family. So it was tough. It was tough, but like I said, the camaraderie and the empowerment was like nothing I've ever seen since then. I mean, I've been in some strong rooms. I've spoken to audiences before. I've been part of amazing events that are really motivational and inspiring. And I love to speak myself, but there was nothing like that feeling of, you don't mess with the USA. I mean, it was powerful.
Yeah, I love when people come together. It just
Mm-hmm.
shows you that there's still love, there's still compassion, there's still, humanity in the earth. I love when
Mm-hmm.
people come together. That to me, it always makes me cry. I guess that's the hormonal side of the women, just emotional.
Mm-hmm. No, I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, that for me is it's just amazing. I love to see people come together, especially when things are going so wrong, and we could be against each other, and we all come together. That I love it. I really love that. So, how did
Mm-hmm.
you start to transition, like going from fighting for your life to embracing life? And how did you do like a mindset shift for that?
Well, after I was done with my treatments, the doctor said, okay, I don't see any more cancer. So the treatment worked.
Mhm.
I wasn't officially cured. I have another story about that. That wasn't until 10 years later that I had that conversation with him. But my transition started immediately. I went home for Christmas, which was the fact that I got to be home and see people that I hadn't seen in a while. And obviously I looked
Yeah.
much different. So it was kind of emotional for them, but it was really exciting for me. And I've never been one. I don't have much shame. I mean, I'm a strange person, to be honest with you, Ty-Shaun-Dra. Like, you can ask my wife. Like, I don't have any shame about it. So I think some people might go through some mental. I actually not think I know. I mean, I've talked to plenty of cancer patients, and I know that a lot of them might struggle with their body and their hair and things like that you go through when you go through treatment like that. For me, I mean, I just was ready to walk into the room and like, hey guys, I'm here. I look like I'm half of what I used to be, but I'm just happy to be alive and happy to see people. So I went quickly into this motivated mode of recovery, and not from the cancer, but just I felt behind because
Yeah.
I didn't take as many classes as I needed to. I didn't work out. I wasn't as strong and as fast as I needed to be for sports. I didn't prove myself on the field, so I was starting behind the eight ball when the new season was going to start. There were so many reasons. I didn't get the social experience that college is because I was going through treatment. So there were so many things that I had to catch up on. So I dove right. I kind of kept the same mindset, that determination, and I dove right into. I mean, I went hard at working out and getting back in shape and making sure that I figured out how to make up those classes because I didn't want to graduate late. I didn't want the cancer to take that from me. And
Yeah.
so I went through all of these things, and it was about 2 years, to be honest with you, that I was just in full on determination mode. I mean, I was probably not a very nice person to be around, if I'm being honest with you, because I didn't really have time for other people, which is sad to say. But there was a period, I was a junior, and I'll never forget this conversation I had with a pastor. And he started asking me questions that no one had asked me about the cancer. Most people's questions were, well, what was surgery like? What was chemotherapy like? Did you lose your hair? And then you can imagine all the questions that other 18-year-old boys ask you when you have testicular cancer. I mean, that's a whole nother episode for adults only, probably.
Right.
But and there's some funny stories there, and no complaints. I thought it was fun. I mean, I just, like I said, no shame. I played along with it great. But this guy asked me these questions that weren't anything about my physical illness weren't really anything about how I was diagnosed or what I went through. It was all about how I felt during this period of time. And then he asked me what I felt at the moment.
Yeah.
And that really hit me because I was in that crazy determination mode, type A personality, get out of my way because I got stuff to do.
Yeah.
And I needed to take a step back. And it was at that point that I really thought more deeply about what truly happened to me and how the other forces of my life really helped me get through that. So your question was poignant because it took a while to really work through the emotions of what I went through. And that conversation kind of sparked that. And if I'm being honest, let's see, that was 2 years later. So that was about 2003, maybe 2004. And so it's been almost 20 years that I've been still working through things. I mean, it's a forever ongoing process. Not a day goes by. This is not an exaggeration. Mm-hmm. Not a day goes by in my life where I don't think about what happened during that period of time. Now, some days it's super sad and emotional, like the anniversary every year of 9/11 is a tough day for me. But I know that now, so I don't schedule too many things. I have my time and I say, you know what? I'm just thankful to be alive. And that's what happened. But then there's some days where I just have some funny memories of some of the times I used to have. Like my cousin would wake me up early in the morning, even after chemotherapy. Turns out I think our parents encouraged this because they wanted us to bond together. But like I said, he has cystic fibrosis, so he was going through his own trials and tribulations and struggles, and he didn't know how long his life was going to be at that point.
Yeah.
But those type of things are fun memories. And I remember like waking up playing video games at 6 o'clock in the morning with my little cousin. And so yeah, not a day goes by where I don't think about it. So it's been a journey. I've been thinking about it daily for almost 20 years now.
How did what you experienced during that 4-year period from being diagnosed, going through your treatment, in determination mode, and then coming to this realization of I need to sit with this and really experience it. How did any of that affect your relationship with your wife or getting into that relationship?
Yeah. So, well, can I tell you a story about how my wife is involved in this whole thing?
Please.
So I was diagnosed in 2001. Mm-hmm. And in 2005 is when I technically met my wife in 2003.
Okay.
But it was just an introductory type of thing. One of our friends told us, hi, we were on a mission trip, but she was visiting the group, and that was it. Mm-hmm. But 2 years later, we were on the same trip together, and we became a group of 5 of us became really, really close friends. And me and her stayed in touch. She's from Michigan, so we would spend hours on the phone at night. Do you remember when you used to have to, after 9 o'clock, cell phone minutes were free?
Yes.
Right? Okay, I'm showing my age. And
it's okay. I'm here with you. I'm with you.
You're with me, right? Anyone out there listening knows if you were a child of the 80s or 90s, you know that what it was like. So we would spend hours on the phone. Like once 9 o'clock hit, we would talk to each other. And this was our opportunity because otherwise, it wasn't like text messaging and, video chats and TikTok and all that. So we didn't have
none of that.
So we would talk for hours. Well, anyway, our relationship was starting to get a little bit more serious at this point. And I think we weren't really dating yet, but I think we're kind of starting to think about, maybe there was something more there than just our friendship amongst all the 5 of us who are really, really close.
Yeah.
And so we were having this conversation and she was telling me about her experience as a junior in high school. Now, and when she was a junior in high school, she had this teacher, and may he rest in peace. Actually, he passed earlier this year. It was very sad, unexpectedly, but she had a teacher by the name of Mr. Zill, and he taught a couple different subjects in her school. But one of the things that he did on like one of the first days, maybe it was the first day of the class, she could probably tell the story even better, but he stood up in front of the class and, you're a junior in high school. So what are you, 16, 17 years old? And he said to the class, class, one of the things that we're going to do is periodically during the semester, we're going to take some time and we're going to pray for our future spouse.
Awesome. Oh my God.
Now, my wife explains this and she's like, yeah, think about it. I mean, you're 16, 15, you're probably, especially the boys, they probably can't even take care of themselves. And you're going to ask these kids to pray about their future spouse. Like, what does that even mean? Right.
Wow.
So, but they all kind of looked at him kind of funny, but he's a well-respected guy. A lot of people like Mr. Zill, so they just, whatever. They periodically throughout the semester they would do this, and they would stop and they would pray for their future spouse. So the semester ended, and she's changed classes or whatever, and really didn't think much of it. That was just something that you did in that class. Well, we're having this conversation, so it's now fall of 2005, like I said before. So this is 4 years later, and my wife and I are talking, and I was kind of telling her a little bit more about my story. And I was telling her, well, when you were a junior in high school, that's when I was a freshman in college. And she's like, well, tell me about that. So I started telling her, and I explained to her that the whole cancer story that you just heard. And she says to me, wait a minute. So when I was a junior in high school, you were a freshman, you were going through all of that cancer situation. I was praying for you that whole time.
Oh my God.
And Ty-Shaun-Dra, I cannot tell you,
oh my God.
I didn't even know what to say. I think I dropped the phone. It was probably 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night when she told me this. And I was like, that's exactly when I was going through my treatment. And I was like, how did you know? And she's like, I didn't know, but Mr. Zill told me to pray for my future spouse, and I did religiously. And it was incredibly powerful.
Oh my God.
Isn't that crazy?
It's amazing.
So, yeah, it just hit me.
Hi everyone. Join the Kingdom Fanatics community. Get exclusive content, green room access with our guests, and more. Visit our website at whogodsays.com. Like and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate your love and support. To find all information on joining our community, being a guest on the show, donating on our PayPal donation page, and more, visit us at whogodsays.com. Now back to the show.
Okay. So I just have one more question.
It's okay.
I want to ask, what do you believe is your purpose?
Man, my purpose is to use the gifts and skills that I have to make the world a better place. And, it took me a while to figure out what those were, but I understand them now. There's specifically, it's communication and helping people live out their generosity. And that's what I love to talk about.
Oh, that is so awesome. That is awesome. I love it. Yes. Do you have any upcoming projects or anything that you want to mention to the audience?
Well, the one thing I'll mention is I just talked about what I love to do. I speak with organizations about building cultures of generosity. And I think it's critically important for good business moving forward in our world. I think we need to get back to the natural human desire to support other people. And so if you do that inside the workplace, your organization will be as productive as it can be. And that organization and you will be able to use your own skills and gifts for good in the world. So if you're interested in hearing someone talk about that, or you got a team that you need to be motivated to be more generous to their coworkers and their customers, then I'm your guy. So hit me up, bobdepasquale.com. That's my main focus.
Awesome. Now you also wrote a book.
I did. I spent 12 years working for a big financial firm, and I do own a company right now, and that's what I work on. But I realized that I can't speak with as many people as I'd like to about technology and how we can make wiser financial decisions and be more generous. And so I figured, you know what, I'm going to write a book. And now that I don't work for a big company that kind of, for compliance reasons doesn't really allow you to be an author, I could now. So a couple of years ago, I wrote the book, and well, it's about almost 2 years ago now that the book was published in December. So it's a great ride. There's an audio book, there's a hard copy, there's a digital copy, whatever you want. Any version of the book is possible. It's called Personal Finance in a Public World, and it's about how to make wiser money decisions using technology as a positive force.
Awesome. Where can we find that?
That's also on my website, bobdepasquale.com, or if you go to Amazon and you search Bob DePasquale, you'll pull up my author page, or you can just search Personal Finance in a Public World, and it's in bookstores too. If you go to Barnes & Noble, they could likely get it for you as well.
Ooh, awesome. I'll definitely have all of your links underneath the description in the video. I want to thank you so much. Thank you. I love your story. I love your energy. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ty-Shaun-Dra. All the best in your mission, and by the way, love the title of your show. I think it's powerful. It really
Thank
is. So
you.
all the best with that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today on the Who God Says podcast with your host and Kingdom Ambassador, Ty-Shaun-Dra. Go to whogodsays.com to join the mailing list for episode premieres, upcoming guests, and more. Send in your questions to be a part of the show at whogodsays@gmail.com. And don't forget, join the Kingdom Fanatic community. Until next time, be blessed and also be a blessing.